unlocking the potential of all children is what we want to do. That's how we ensure that we're successful. Every child's life is successful, and how we can ensure that we survive into the future. And in terms of education and people's approach and understanding about Indigenous issues and our history, we're on our way. I mean, there's a lot of resources. I mean, for the general Canadian public, there's a lot of resources out there now. In particular, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, more recently the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, and the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls report, which has a huge amount of historical background attached to it, as well as the telling of lived experiences of residential school survivors and other individuals who have been impacted. Their loved one has gone missing or has been murdered. I mean, these are really important educational resources in terms that I would encourage people, if they haven't looked at it, to look at it. But in addition to that, there is it's not a resurgence, but there is a huge wave of Indigenous people in the creative field, whether that be in arts or in literature. There's a lot of Indigenous authors that are telling of their stories and speaking about reconciliation. So there's a lot out there that people can turn to. I love talking to educators. My mother is a teacher and continues to be my most important teacher. Like, teachers are on the ground and have the direct ability to provide learnings, obviously, to young people and help to shape, young people's, how they think and critically think, et cetera. For Indigenous peoples, we're not quite there yet, although there's been a lot of improvement in terms of improving the educational system, which has its roots, colonial history, in children being forcibly removed from their communities and forced to attend residential schools, which were anything but schools. And we don't have to get into that horrible reality. Although I think it's an important conversation. We're in a place now where in many provinces, including my own province of British Columbia, there are First Nations education authorities. And one of the things that Indigenous communities, and rightfully so, in my opinion, want to take control over is the control of the education of their children, knowing their customs and traditions and ways of being, and how to embrace and create the space for a child to achieve their full potential. So what's happened in this country is Indigenous communities have been able to take over jurisdiction of the education of their children, and it's led to the creation of many First Nations schools in some provinces from K to 12 and potentially beyond, which is incredibly important and provides a very different learning environment. In other areas, in post-secondary institutions, there's a lot that has changed as well, a lot that has changed in like the school system generally. There's requirements in provinces that there be Indigenous components to learning, that there be a required teaching of the history and the reality, contemporary reality of Indigenous peoples in order to graduate from high school. And I think that's progress, and Indigenous teachers are in the school systems teaching those courses. When I was in law school, there was one course on Indigenous, it was a seminar, but it was on Indigenous legal, I can't remember what it was called, but it was on Indigenous legal traditions. And now if you were to go into law school, there's a whole bunch of different courses that one can take. Likewise, in universities, in undergraduate degrees, there's whole degrees that you can get in Indigenous studies, and that's really important. Getting young people at the very beginning the resources and the true history is incredibly necessary, and teachers play a huge role in changing realities and changing the status quo, and it starts with having very open-minded and thoughtful individuals.